right. Day 2 of 31 horror reviews for Halloween. We're going back to 30 Days of Night. Now, this was one I actually started last year, but I ran out of time because this was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. And that is 30 Days of Night Bloodsucker Tales. Bloodsucker Tales is an 8-issue mini-series that is written by two different people, and it's two different stories. We'll talk about the first story. I should explain this, because this is a big caveat. For the longest time, if you have a Comixology Unlimited account, they didn't have the trade available, they just had the single issues. And each single issue would be broken in half with the first story and then the second story, and there really wouldn't be too much of a cohesive thing other than the art's substantially different between the two. And it's a terrible way to read this. What I recommend, and Comixology Unlimited just put this up, is picking up the 30 Days of Night Deluxe Book 2. Last year, accidentally, quite frankly, I reviewed all of the Deluxe Book 1. I didn't know these existed, really. I think I knew there was one. I didn't know there were two of them last year. And I picked these up early this year and realized, oh, I've reviewed everything in the first one, so it's kind of fun. This year we get to start with the beginning of Book 2. So without further ado, we'll jump into the first story, which is called Dead Billy Dead. And this is by Steve Niles, with art by Cody Chamberlain. This is about... It opens with a guy being mauled by a vampire, and because the vampire lost his friend in the Return to Barlow arc. This, to my knowledge, isn't a vampire we necessarily interacted with in that arc, but he was there. There were a lot of vampires there, and a lot of them escaped what happened in that. And he makes Billy a vampire, but Billy manages to kill the vampire in a bloody, nasty way, but he's unfortunately turned, and it is about his struggles with that, not truly understanding what's happening to him. Meanwhile, the professor from the second arc of this story wants Billy to do experiments on him, and there's some police, there's a cop that's right in the middle of this, and of course, Billy's estranged girlfriend. And when I think of Dead Billy Dead, it's okay. It's borderline not very good. Unlike with the previous stories, even with the shorter ones prior to this, the first 4 arcs, counting the annual, there was always a feeling that we were progressing the story in some way, and there's a teeny tiny bit of that at the end of this story, which I won't get into, but further on in the reviews for this year I will. But it's just not good. The art's decent, I will say that. In fact, it's a nice, in a way, a departure from what we're used to with 30 Days of Night. It's more of a standard comic book style, which was nice. It was a nice change of pace. Next, we get into the Juarez story, and this is by Matt Fraction. And I need to put a caveat out there. I'm not the biggest Matt Fraction fan in the world. I do love his Punisher War Journal comic, but it's been a long time since I read it. Matt Fraction was one of those comic authors in the mid-2000s that he would work on a book and it'd get canceled. He just had this bad touch, and I don't know what it is about him. But he writes a story called Juarez, which deals with a PI named Lex Nova, who is investigating these young women going missing in the town of Juarez, Mexico. And there's also a weird clown vampire family that's killing people, but they're weirdly connected. Lex Nova and the vampire family are kind of connected, and it's kind of obvious what the twist is on it, but it's bad. I should say Ben Templesmith illustrates this. It is the worst art Ben Templesmith has ever done. His art is an acquired taste. I will say that. Even in the original 30 Days of Night, I know people that are like, I couldn't get into the art of that. And there was something about how he drew snow in this minimalism of his art that I always liked. And then he did an interesting take on the urban decay of Los Angeles in that second arc. But in this, drawing the desert is not his forte. You can't always tell if it's day or night and stuff. It's just bad, and it feels so long. You feel like this is something I didn't think about till I got to Bloodsucker Tales. 30 Days of Night is a unique series because it's a series of mini-series that are at most 3 issues up until this. This is 8 issues, and granted, you could argue they're split in half, so each story gets about 4 issues of coverage. Juarez feels like 20 issues of nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing, and it is horrific to read. Absolutely horrific. It took me an entire year to read this comic. I'm dead serious. I only just finished it the other day. And it blew my mind how terrible this comic is. It does not get enough credit for how bad it is. And there is a drop off of the quality of 30 Days of Night as it went on, but this, to me, it doesn't get enough credit for how much it drops off. The twist is so obvious. Everything is so obvious in this. Lex Nova's supposed to be... He's a crazy person. He acts like a noir detective with his monologues, but he says his monologues out loud. And it's supposed to be a joke, but it really gets old really quickly, especially when he's just being racist and rude. And it's not funny, ever. It's just not funny. It's just, quite frankly, pretty stupid. It's really stupid to read. I hated when he was on in the front. The vampires in this are just weird. They're not menacing. They're supposed to be menacing, but they aren't. One of the women vampires, because they're like a weird juggalo family nonsense. They're painted with, they have clown faces, but the main guy, they're looking for their uncle or something. I don't know. The male one dresses in a business suit, and the women dress in lingerie, and it's stupid. It's everything about this is stupid. The town government's involved in this with the vampires. Everything's dumb. You don't care about anyone, and unlike with the other story in this, I have yet to see a connection between the Juarez story and the rest of 30 Days of Night. If this series is one thing, it's continuity, but I think this will probably be ignored. I'd be genuinely shocked if they brought back any of these characters for a sequel of any kind. So overall, what do I rank these two stories? Dead Billy Dead is probably a 3 out of 5. It's okay. It's a vampire story we've seen many times over. There's a little too much animal murder for my liking, which unfortunately is a theme this season. I'm sorry, everyone, but yeah, I'm not thrilled with that. I'll try to warn you guys when it happens, but I don't like it. Makes me very irritated. As for Juarez, it gets a flat 0 out of 5. This is the worst 30 Days of Night story I've ever read. It's also the worst vampire story I've ever read, period. Um, I'm glad I read these. Well, I'm glad I read the first one of these. The other one I could have. I considered skipping to the next story. So, anyway, have a nice day.